Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving into the $200 first year, demystifying the investing journey. Look, we're unpacking a topic that honestly feels completely overwhelming to almost everyone just starting out: investing. Specifically, we're going to look at what actually happens when you put real hard-earned money on the line for the very first time. I'm here with our resident investor who's ready to share the totally honest, unvarnished story of their very first year in the market. Thanks. I am so excited to be here and get into this. We're going to look at my exact numbers, the whole emotional roller coaster I went on, and, of course, the crucial lessons I learned along the way. This is just a pure personal case study today. I've got no finance degree, no rich parents, just a regular salary and a stubborn commitment to finally start.
I love that. So let's cut right to the chase here. We all hear constantly that we should be investing, but it usually feels so abstract. What actually happens after 12 whole months of putting your money into the market? Like, what was the final result? Well, I will give it to you straight. My exact final portfolio value after exactly 12 months was $2,631. Wow, okay. That is a very real, very specific number. $2,631. So how did you actually get there? What did you have to put in to get that out? So, over the course of the year, I invested exactly $200 every single month. By the end of those 12 months, I deposited $2,400 of my own cash. The rest, that was just the market doing its thing. But getting there definitely wasn't some easy straight line up.
Right, so my first question has to be, why exactly $200 a month? It's just a very specific amount. Why not $50 or, $500? Context is absolutely everything here. At the time I started doing this, I was taking home about $1,800 to $2,200 a month after taxes. And my fixed expenses, we're talking rent, food, transportation, those ran me about $1,100 to $1,300.
Okay, yes, you really weren't working with a massive surplus at the end of the month.
Exactly. I had roughly $500 to $900 left over. $200 just felt like enough to be a real investment, But it was small enough that if I completely messed up or if the market totally crashed, I literally wouldn't lose sleep over it. Honestly, it was entirely about psychological safety.
Psychological safety. That makes a ton of sense. But how did you structure that leftover cash to make sure you didn't, say, accidentally invest your rent money? The system I used was incredibly simple. I literally just divided that leftover cash into 3 strict buckets. First, I always topped up my emergency fund. Second was my fun money, for traveling, eating out, living my actual life. And the third bucket was that strict $200 for investing. Keeping that boundary meant the investment money was truly locked away in my mind. My one absolute rule was, I cannot touch this for at least 12 months.
So you've got this $200, it's isolated and ready to go. What did you actually buy? Did you just go pick a bunch of random tech stocks? Oh, no way, definitely not. I spent weeks overthinking this, but I ended up utilizing something called an ETF, or an exchange-traded fund. Think of it as basically a basket of stocks you can buy with just one click. So instead of trying to guess if Apple or Google is going to do better, you just buy a little tiny piece of all of them at once.
That's smart.
Which one did you actually pick? I chose a ticker symbol called VOO. Honestly, it's incredibly boring. It just tracks the S&P 500, which basically means the 500 largest companies in the US. Warren Buffett has recommended this strategy for decades. It's reliable, it's low fee, and best of all, it meant I didn't have to pretend to be some stock-picking genius.
Okay, so you set up the transfer, you buy this really boring ETF, does it just slowly go up and you get to feel great about yourself? Oh man, I wish. Months 1 through 3 were totally fine, but then month 4 hit and the market just started pulling back. At one point, I opened my app and my portfolio was down 6.2% from what I had originally paid in.
Oh no.
That's right when the panic sets in, right? Because even if it's not tens of thousands of dollars, seeing your hard-earned money just literally vanish on a screen is really tough. It was emotionally terrible. I had this intense, constant internal dialogue going on. My fear voice was just screaming at me, "You're down. Sell right now. Just put it back in a savings account." But my rational voice had to fight back, reminding me, hey, you haven't actually lost anything until you hit sell. A loss on paper isn't a realized loss. Just choosing not to sell felt like this incredibly active, exhausting choice every single week.
Wow, so how did you actually stop yourself from caving and hitting that sell button during those really scary months? 2 words: automated transfers. I'd set my account to automatically pull that $200 every single payday. Because it was completely automatic, I ended up utilizing a concept called dollar cost averaging. Okay, what does it actually mean in practice for someone doing this? Well, it means that because I invested exactly $200 every month, no matter what the market was doing, I was actually buying the dip. So when the market was down in month 4, my $200 naturally bought more shares than it did back in month 1.
Over time, that actually lowers your average cost per share. It literally turns those terrifying red months into a literal discount sale on shares.
Okay, so you held on, you bought the dip automatically, and we already know you ended up with $2,631. What was the actual return rate on all of that? Right, so the crucial point is that by month 9, I was finally back in the green. And by month 12, my total gain was a 9.6% return on my money. Okay, so that's what, about $231 in pure profit? Exactly. And I know some people might be thinking, $230? Come on, that doesn't make you rich. But we really have to compare it to the alternative. If I had just left that $2,400 sitting in a standard savings account at, say, a 2% interest rate, I would have earned a whopping $48. I earned almost 5 times that amount just by sitting through a little bit of volatility.
That is a huge difference when you compare it to a basic savings account. But still, $231. Is all this emotional stress really worth the effort long term? See, that is exactly the right question to ask. Year 1 is absolutely not about getting rich. But let's look at what this looks like over 30 years. If you take that exact same $200 a month and it compounds at an 8% historical average return, in 30 years, you don't just have a few extra $100. You have over $272,000. You only put in $72,000 of your own cash. The market basically added $200,000 right on top of it. That is the literal magic of compound growth. Over $270,000. I mean, that is life-changing money. So, is it really that simple? Does literally everyone who invests $200 a month get that exact same result at the end of the day, investor? I am so glad you asked that, because this is where we really have to zoom out and get very honest with ourselves. The math we just talked about, compounding at 8%, is entirely neutral. It runs the exact same calculation for everyone. But the real-life conditions required for that math to run uninterrupted, those are definitely not neutral. What do you mean by conditions exactly? I mean systemic life conditions. We're talking your zip code, your employer, your access to good information, your safety net. Let's actually look at how the exact same $200 behaves in completely different real-world scenarios.
Okay, so we're looking at this table comparing 30-year outcomes. Let's break down these 3 floors or scenarios for that exact same $200 investment. Walk me through this.
Sure. Let's look at floor 1. This person does everything right. They automate their transfer, but they have zero financial buffer. The car breaks down, medical bills hit, their hours get cut at work, they have to pause and restart their investing constantly. Over 30 years, because of those constant interruptions, they only end up with $71,000. That massive gap isn't a lack of discipline, it's the compounding cost of financial scarcity.
Wow, okay, and what about floor 2? It looks like they end up with $214,000. It's better, for sure, but still not hitting that full potential.
Right. So floor 2 has stability. They never have to pause the transfer. But nobody ever told them that their employer's fund charges a 1.1% hidden fee, compared to a standard 0.04% index fund fee. That tiny, seemingly insignificant 1% difference literally eats $94,000 of their potential wealth over 30 years. It's just a lack of access to basic financial literacy.
That's crazy. And so floor 3 is the ideal scenario here?
Yes. Floor 3 hits that $243,000. Why? Because they had an emergency fund. When life happened, a pay cut, a sudden rent hike, they didn't have to pause their investments. Their emergency fund acted as a shield, allowing the math of compounding to run completely without interruption. Same exact math, completely different starting floors.
That really puts things into perspective. The foundation matters just as much as the math itself. So, bringing it back to your first year, it sounds like year 1 is really just about building that floor 3 foundation. Exactly. And this actually follows a pattern you see in building almost any kind of passive income or wealth. It's what they call the hockey stick pattern, meaning it's completely flat for a really long time before it finally shoots up. You nailed it. Year 1 is slow and the growth is painfully flat. You are literally just building the infrastructure and building the habit. Most people end up quitting during this phase because, frankly, it's boring and the returns are tiny. But you have to normalize that boring flat trajectory because that is the required runway you need before that rapid acceleration hits later on.
Okay, so once you actually have that foundation and you've survived the boring flatline, how do you eventually expand? Do you just keep buying the exact same ETF forever, or are there other avenues? I mean, you can absolutely just keep buying that same ETF. But once your behavioral habits are really solid, you can definitely explore other passive income avenues. For example, once you've built up a bit of capital, you can look into REITs, real estate investment trusts.
Okay, what are those? They basically allow you to invest in real estate portfolios without ever having to go buy a building yourself or, deal with unclogging toilets for tenants. They pay out regular dividends, which you can then just reinvest. It's another totally hands-off path that compounds over time, but honestly, it only works if you've already mastered the discipline of leaving your investments alone to grow. Okay, let's bring it all together. Looking back at your 12 months, what are the absolute biggest takeaways for someone watching this explainer right now? I've boiled it down to 6 hard-won lessons. First, the account you use matters way less than the habit itself. Stop overthinking the perfect app and just start. Second, red months are discounts, not losses. Third, please do not check your portfolio every single day. It will absolutely drive you insane. I definitely would be guilty of checking it every hour. Oh, we all are at first. Okay, lesson 4. Boring ETFs beat exciting individual stocks every time for beginners. Number 5. The behavioral infrastructure you build in year 1 is actually worth vastly more than the initial profit you make. And finally, number 6. Start before you are ready. Look, I didn't know everything when I started. I literally just learned by doing.
I love how actionable this all is. If someone watching wants to literally go do this right after this explainer ends, what are the exact steps? Here is your fast 5-step setup guide. You can literally do this in about 15 minutes. Step 1, pick a modern, zero-fee broker. Step 2, open and verify your account with your ID. Step 3, transfer your first amount. Seriously, even if it's just $50. And step 4 is actually buying the ETF? Yes, buy a simple index ETF like VOO or VTI. And step 5, and this is the absolute most important one, set up an automatic monthly transfer to happen right on your payday. Just remove the decision-making process entirely.
That is incredibly clear. It really takes away all the mystery. Any final words for our viewers? Just this. A year ago, I was exactly where so many of you are right now. Watching explainers, thinking, man, I should really start, and then doing absolutely nothing. The only thing that finally closed that gap for me was making a deposit so small it honestly felt silly. The gap between knowing you should do it and actually doing it is massive. It really is. The best time to start investing was a year ago, but the second best time, that's today. So what is stopping you from making that first small deposit right now? What a perfect place to leave it. Thank you so much for breaking down your first year with such incredible honesty. And thank you all for watching this explainer.